Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a blue-eyed optimist who thinks everything is fine. We do have an issue in Japan, namely, we do have an enormous amount of public debt. You know, debt to GDP is now 200%. And you do actually see that the Bank of Japan has actually done a fair bit to monetize the debt. Over the last 15 years, every year the Bank of Japan has bought about 45% of the IOUs issued by the Japanese Treasury, right? So monetary and fiscal policy do go together here. The worst thing about Japan, however, is not the fact that the level of debt is absolutely high. The worst thing is that I've got a tax system that simply cannot recoup. This is the tax multiplier. So what does that mean? When national income, GDP, when national income grows by 1%, how much do public revenues grow? And in a normal country, or in a fair country, basically that is about 1. So when the pie expands by 1%, that the public share in it expands by 1% as well. Unfortunately, in Japan, that multiplier is 0.4%. In other words, with the current tax system, the Japanese cannot grow their way out of the problem. As a result of that, Japanese politics is not a pretty picture, because you do have to raise taxes. You know, and right now we are again in one of these situations where the prime minister is having a tough time, his popularity is plunging, and it's quite likely that we are actually going to get, you know, some election in Japan coming sooner or later. But for Japan to raise taxes, to increase the general sales tax, is an issue that they won't be able to avoid going forward. Good news. The magic bullet for Japan. Now, you talked a lot about farming. Watch out for Japanese farming. You know, a friend of mine who is the advisor to the Democratic Party and a former bureaucrat of the Ministry of Agriculture in Japan, he actually calculates that Japan could become a net exporter of food within 2 years' time. And the reason is very simple. Japan, as you know, has a very archaic farm subsidy system where basically you are paid to produce stuff that you could buy at 1/7 of the price in the global market. If that subsidy were to go away and the Japanese farmers would stop producing low-grade rice, which you could import much cheaper from Asia, and you would actually shift to produce koshihikari, the Lexus, the Porsche of rice, the Chinese would buy this very, very quickly. There's a growing market with the evolution and the rising per capita income in the People's Republic of China. The market for luxury, for high-quality agricultural products in Japan, you know, is rising. The good news is that there are lots of negotiations with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, a free trade zone in Asia-Pacific, spearheaded by the Americans, a very important issue. And the government in Japan is going to be moving to a decision on participating in that. So watch out for this. There is a better than ever chance that we are actually going to get true agricultural reform in Japan. Peter, I thought you'd find this amusing. This is you know, how to use agricultural land. This is in the north of Japan. They plant different grains of rice, you know, so that you get these pretty pictures there. So they are very creative. I guess you just have to be a tall person to really enjoy this. One other problem is, of course, the fact, you know, that I mentioned productivity growth. I mentioned relentless investment in research and development. You know, one of the issues that you do have is, of course, that India and China are investing a lot in human capital. It's just natural because there's such a big bulge of the younger generation coming through, while in Japan they're unfortunately dying out. I thought this statistics might be of interest in terms of where the challenges for all of us are going to be coming going forward. This looks at the international students in America. You see the absolute number. Obviously, I apologize, I didn't put Australia in there. You know, but you see when you look at the actual graduate school level, you see that actually 70% of all the Indians are actually in graduate school. And I personally think they should be required to do at least 2 PhDs to keep them up the job markets for as long as possible. Finally, on the yen, with all this government debt, with a very bad tax system, isn't the yen going to collapse? Well, no. Japan is not Greece. Japan is not Greece. Japan happens to be the world's second largest creditor country on earth. Every day, there's $1.8 billion more flowing into Japan than going out. The world owes Japan. The world borrows from Japan. And in fact, when there are the occasional periods of uncertainty, like this recent worry about the Middle East, what happens to the yen? The yen strengthens because the global financial community pays back their short-term speculative loans that they've got on Japan. So I think for all intents and purposes, you know, the yen is going to remain a relatively firm currency, particularly if I'm right, and we are actually going to get both a cyclical as well as a structural recovery in Japan. By the way, next time you are jet-lagged in your hotel in Tokyo at 3 o'clock in the morning, try this. It is the only currency that actually floats on water. Thank you.